I was born on February 29th, a day the world only acknowledges once every 4 years. For most people, that sounds unusual, maybe even special. But for me, it was a curse. My mother, Anna, believed that being born on a leap day meant I carried something unholy. She was once a gifted painter in Prague, her canvases full of color, but her mind was painted in darkness. After I was born, her schizophrenia worsened. She said voices told her I didn't belong to this world, that I should only exist on the day time itself faltered. February 29th, when the calendar broke and the veil between worlds thinned. My father, Viktor, a clockmaker who understood time better than anyone, was powerless against it. He drowned in alcohol, trying to blur the guilt of a secret affair that had brought me into existence. In one of his drunken trances, he agreed to my mother's madness. They announced that I had died at birth, then locked me in the basement of our stone house to bury the truth along with me. They said it was to protect the family. But really it was to protect themselves from their own shame. I grew up in the dark, listening to footsteps and laughter above me, and sometimes my mother's crying between fits of silence. I didn't know what the world looked like, only that down here time didn't move. The clocks upstairs ticked for everyone else but not for me. I was the leap year child, a ghost between years, a secret that breathed only when the calendar allowed it. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The basement was my whole world. No windows, no sunlight, just 4 walls wrapped in gray insulation foam, and the hum of a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. When it flickered, I knew it was almost time for food. Twice a day, a metal tray slid through a narrow hatch in the door. The sound of metal scraping concrete was the only clock I had. Morning or night didn't matter. Down there, time had no rhythm. The air was thick and heavy, tasting like dust and iron. I learned early on that silence was my only companion. I used to trace my name into the wall with my fingernails, carving small marks to count the days. After a while, the scratches became my calendar. I learned that it took 1,461 days for my mother to open the door again, a full leap cycle. On that day, she came dressed in white, holding balloons, cake, and candles. Her smile looked almost human then. She would stroke my hair and whisper, "Today you're real again, Helen. Today, time forgives you." For a few hours every 4 years I existed. Then as quickly as it came, the light was gone and the door locked again. The world disappeared and I returned to being invisible. The books came later. My mother began leaving them through the slot, religious texts, stories about demons, and books about curses and redemption. Sometimes she scribbled notes in the margins. "Stay pure. Don't listen to the voices. They want your soul." I read everything she gave me, though I didn't understand it at first. Words became my escape. Through them, I discovered a world of colors and people I could never touch. One book, a torn copy of the Bible, became my teacher. I read about light and darkness, sin and salvation. I wondered which one I was, the darkness or the punishment for someone else's sin. My father rarely came near the door, but I knew when he was there. I could hear his footsteps, slower, heavier than my mother's, and the faint clinking of bottles. Sometimes he would stop and whisper, "I'm sorry." Other times he'd say nothing at all, only breathe against the door like a man visiting a grave. I think he wanted to let me out once. I heard him argue with her. His voice shook. "Anna, she's not cursed. She's our child." But my mother's reply sliced through the silence. "She's not yours to save. You brought her into this world broken. Now she must stay hidden until time erases her." The next day, the sound of glass breaking echoed through the floorboards. My father went quiet for weeks after that. I learned to listen to life through the wood and pipes above me. The house spoke in sounds. Lukas running across the hallway, doors slamming, Emil's laughter, the creak of chairs during dinner. I built stories in my head, what color their rooms were, how the air smelled when sunlight touched it, how warm it must feel to be loved openly. Sometimes on quiet nights, I heard Lukas playing with toy cars or reading aloud from a school book. His voice was the closest thing to a lullaby I ever had. Then one day the rhythm changed. I must have been about 8 when I heard a ball bounce down the stairs, rolling until it hit the door. There was a pause. Then a voice. A boy's voice. "Hello? Is someone down there?" My heart stopped. I hadn't heard a human voice directed at me in years. I crawled to the door, pressed my face against the cold metal slot, and whispered back, "Yes." He gasped. "Who are you?" "I'm Hellen," I said, trembling. The boy's footsteps pounded away, then returned. "Mama, there's someone in the basement." The silence that followed was sharp and endless. Then came the sound of heels clattering down the stairs, fast, angry. My mother's voice thundered, "Lukas, don't ever speak of this again." I heard a slap, a cry, and the trembling of the door as she locked it harder than ever before. Later that night I heard her whisper outside, "You see what happens when you draw attention, Hellen? You could destroy us all." From that day on the house changed. I could feel Lukas' confusion in the way he moved. Quieter now, careful. Sometimes he stopped outside the door and whispered my name, just to make sure I was real. But he never spoke to me again. Fear had settled into him the way dust had settled into me. Years passed and I grew taller, thinner, paler. The walls became my reflection. My hair grew down my back in tangled ropes. I used a piece of broken mirror to see my face. Pale as bone, eyes too big for my body. I didn't look like the ghost she described, but maybe that's what she saw when she looked at me. Emil was born after Lukas. I learned about him through sound, the cries of a newborn, the laughter of a child learning to speak, the soft strains of violin music that drifted down the vents. My mother adored him. She called him her miracle boy. Her proof that the curse was contained. I never blamed him. He didn't know I existed. Every year I marked the seasons by what I heard. The hush of snow above, the whistle of the wind through the chimney, the muffled sound of birthday songs and Christmas carols. I could tell when the holidays came. The air smelled different, even through the cracks. Cinnamon, baked bread, candle wax. I would close my eyes and imagine sitting upstairs with them, blowing out candles that weren't just for a curse. But the door never opened. Not until February 29th returned. Then for a single day I became real again. My mother would appear, face pale but smiling, holding a small cake with uneven frosting. "Happy birthday, my leap year child," she would say softly, as if speaking to a spirit. We'd sit on the cold floor, and she'd light a candle that flickered like the light bulb above us. I'd make a wish I never said aloud, to stay in the light just one more day. When the candle died, she would close the door again, and the light, both hers and mine, would disappear. That was my life. Years condensed into moments, love tangled with fear, and silence that felt like eternity. I learned early that existing in the dark is not the same as living. Down there I wasn't growing older. I was just waiting for time, waiting for forgiveness, waiting for the world to remember that I was ever born at all. February 28, 2024. The night before the leap year's return. The house that had once been a cradle of secrets was now quiet, half renovated, half forgotten. Lukas, now 21, stood in the hallway of his childhood home, his hand brushing the chipped paint of the banister. He'd come home from his university dorm to check on his mother, Anna, who had grown more fragile and unpredictable since his father Viktor's passing. But there was another reason, a shadow from his childhood that refused to leave him. The basement. He'd never forgotten the sound he heard when he was 10, the whisper through the door, the voice that said, "I'm Hellen." His mother had sworn it was his imagination, a phantom echo, the result of too many ghost stories. But Lukas wasn't a child anymore. He'd studied architecture, structure, symmetry, and he knew when something in a building didn't fit. The basement door had always been an anomaly. Reinforced steel in a wooden house. No one built that by accident. That morning, while his mother napped, he found the old key ring in his father's workshop. Most were rusted, labeled in Viktor's shaky handwriting, garage, attic, gate. But one key was different, unlabeled, small, with teeth worn smooth by years of use. His heart pounded as he slipped it into his pocket. As the clock neared midnight, Lukas descended the stairs, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The basement door loomed at the end of the corridor, the metal cold even from a distance. He hesitated, listening. Only silence. But behind that silence, something alive. Something waiting. He turned the key. It clicked with a sound that was almost a sigh. The sigh of a lock that hadn't been opened in over a decade. The smell hit him first. Stale air, old wood, and something faintly metallic. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness and revealed a narrow staircase spiraling down. He took one step, then another, until the concrete floor came into view. And then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a reflection. A pale figure crouched near the wall, thin arms drawn to her chest. But when she blinked, when her eyes met his, Lukas felt the world tilt. She wasn't a ghost. She was a girl. Real. Breathing. Terrified. "Who are you?" he whispered, though deep down he already knew. The girl blinked against the light, her voice a rasp and used to speech. "You found me." Her name was carved into the wall behind her, Hellen, etched in hundreds of tiny scratches. Lukas's throat tightened. "How long? How long have you been here?" "I don't know," she said softly. "Since before time started counting me." He wanted to cry, but she flinched at the sound of his breathing, as if afraid the air itself might punish her. Slowly, he lowered the flashlight, letting it rest on the floor so it wouldn't blind her. The beam spread gently across the room, revealing the marks she had made. The old books piled in corners, the metal tray rusted from years of use. "I'm Lukas," he said. Her lips curved into a faint, uncertain smile. "I know your voice." The words hit him like a blow. She remembered. All these years she had been listening to him, to life, to a world she was never allowed to touch. Lukas knelt, unable to find words big enough for the moment. "I'm taking you out of here," he said finally. But when he reached for her hand, she hesitated, looking toward the ceiling. "She'll know," she whispered. "She always knows when the door opens." He didn't understand, until he heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, uneven, coming down the hallway above. His mother's voice, trembling and sharp. "Lukas, where are you?" Her tone was different. Not angry. Afraid. Lukas grabbed Hellen's hand. "Come on." They ran up the stairs, every step groaning under their feet. When they reached the hallway, the lights flickered. Anna stood at the other end, pale as marble, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment the world froze. "Hellen," she breathed, voice cracking. No, this can't be. You were sealed. The curse, it's waking." "Mom," Lukas said. "She's not a curse. She's your daughter." Anna staggered backward, shaking her head violently. "No, you don't understand. I kept her safe. The world mustn't see her. She'll bring the darkness back." She turned and bolted toward the living room, muttering prayers under her breath, tearing at her own hair. Lukas pulled Hellen into his room upstairs, slamming the door behind them. Her body trembled, her skin ghostly under the faint streetlight that leaked through the blinds. For the first time in her life, real light touched her face. She winced, covering her eyes, but then slowly lowered her hands, letting it wash over her. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "It hurts," she whispered. "But it's beautiful." Lukas looked at her. This sister he'd been denied, hidden like a shameful secret, and felt rage twist inside him. "We're leaving," he said. "I'll get you out of this house." Downstairs they could hear their mother's voice, first murmuring, then rising into hysteria. "She's not real. She's the shadow. She'll take my sons." Objects crashed. Drawers slammed. Anna was tearing the house apart. Lukas motioned for Hellen to stay quiet and crouched beside her. "Hide," he whispered. "Under the bed." Hellen obeyed, curling herself into the shadows as footsteps thundered up the stairs. The door burst open. Anna stood there, wild-eyed, a kitchen knife in her trembling hand. "Where is she?" Anna's voice cracked. "Where's the ghost, Lukas?" "There's no ghost, Mom." Lukas stepped between her and the bed. "You've been lying to yourself. She's your daughter, my sister." Anna's face contorted in pain, confusion, denial. "I saved you all," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "When she was born, the clock stopped. The doctor's watch shattered. Time cursed us that day." Lukas shook his head. "You cursed her. You locked her away because you were afraid." Her hand trembled. The knife clattered to the floor. For a heartbeat she seemed to waver, reality flickering in her eyes like the dying light bulb in the hallway. But then she looked toward the mirror, saw her own reflection and screamed, "She's in the walls!" Anna lunged toward the bed. Lukas grabbed her arm, struggling to hold her back. "Stop! You're hurting her." Hellen stayed silent, her breath shallow, eyes wide as she watched from the darkness. For the first time, she saw her mother not as a monster, but as a broken woman swallowed by her own delusions. She saw the fear that had built her prison. Not hatred but madness. The struggle ended when Lukas managed to push his mother back, her body collapsing onto the floor in sobs. "You can't take her from me," Anna whispered. "If she leaves, everything ends." Lukas knelt beside her, voice trembling. "Maybe it should." Downstairs, the clock struck midnight. February 29, 2024. The leap day had come. In the silence that followed, Hellen crawled out from under the bed. Her bare feet touched the wooden floor, warm, alive, real. The air smelled of dust and freedom. She knelt beside her mother, unsure whether to reach out or run. Anna looked up at her, eyes empty, wet, but for a brief moment lucid. "You're still my little girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to keep you safe." "I know," Hellen said softly, "but I was never safe down there." The light from the window grew brighter, spilling across the floor, touching all three of them. For the first time in 20 years, the house wasn't silent. It breathed. And in that breath, between fear and forgiveness, Hellen finally stepped into the world that had forgotten her, her shadow dissolving into the morning light. The storm arrived just after midnight. Sheets of rain lashing against the windows, thunder crawling across the sky like a warning. The house seemed alive, trembling under the weight of its own secrets. Lukas tried to hold it together, but panic had already seeped into every wall, every breath. Hellen stood in the hallway barefoot, the hem of her old dress clinging to her legs. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the lightning flashes, her hair damp with sweat and fear. It was the first time she had seen the outside through a window, the dark world beyond glass, shimmering with rain and streetlights. She wanted to touch it, to breathe it, but her mother's cries from downstairs anchored her to the nightmare still unfolding. Anna was unraveling. She stumbled through the living room, gripping the family Bible to her chest, whispering fragments of prayers and nonsense. Viktor, her husband, the man who had kept his silence for years, stood by helplessly. His eyes were hollow, his hands shaking around an empty bottle. Emil, only 16, hovered near the stairs, trembling, not understanding what horror had come alive in his home. "Mom, please stop," Lukas begged, stepping between her and Hellen. "She's not cursed. She's flesh and blood. She's your daughter." Anna's voice cracked into laughter, brittle, broken. "No, not mine. She was hers." The room fell silent except for the storm. Lukas frowned. "What are you talking about?" Anna's eyes flickered toward Viktor. The man looked away, tears welling. "Tell them," she whispered. "Tell them the truth before the curse swallows us all." Viktor's lips trembled. "Anna, tell them," she screamed. Finally he spoke, voice low, shamed. "Hellen, she isn't Anna's child. She's the daughter of someone else." Hellen felt the world tilt beneath her. Her throat tightened. "What?" Anna's hand shook violently as she pointed toward the old portrait above the fireplace. A painting of a ballerina with auburn hair and soft eyes. "Her," Anna hissed. "Lara. She danced in the theater across the river." "Your father." She turned toward Viktor, eyes blazing. "He loved her. And when she died giving birth to that child, he brought the baby to me. Said she was a gift, said we could raise her together." Her voice grew shrill, wild. "But I knew. I felt it. Death followed her. She wasn't born of love. She was born of betrayal." Viktor buried his face in his hands. "I just couldn't let her die, Anna. She was innocent. Innocent." Anna cried. "You let that woman's ghost live in our home. You let her eyes stare at me every time I looked at the child. She wasn't a baby. She was a reminder that I was never enough." The words sliced through the air. Lukas turned to Hellen, who stood motionless, her lips parted, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm sorry," Viktor whispered, voice trembling. "I thought if I kept her safe, if I kept the truth buried." "You buried me," Hellen said softly, her voice breaking for the first time. "You locked me in the dark for a sin that wasn't mine." Anna let out a shriek. clutching her head as if trying to silence voices only she could hear. "She'll destroy us. She already has." Then came the shattering sound, Hellen's scream, the slam of her hand against the window, the crack of breaking glass. Rain and cold air poured into the room. "Hellen, wait!" Lukas shouted, reaching for her. But she was already climbing through the shattered frame, shards cutting into her palms. For the first time in 23 years, she felt the night air hit her skin, sharp, alive, and cruel. She stumbled barefoot into the garden, mud splashing under her feet, rain washing the dust of captivity from her body. Behind her, Anna's cry tore through the night. "Come back. You'll bring death to us all." Hellen didn't look back. She ran through the yard, past the broken gate, onto the empty road that led toward the woods. Every breath burned. Every step felt like defiance. The world was vast and terrifying, but it was real. For the first time, she existed beyond walls. Lukas chased after her, shouting her name, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. Emil followed, tears streaming down his face, while Viktor stayed behind, frozen, a man haunted by the cost of his silence. Anna stumbled after them, barefoot, drenched, her white nightgown clinging to her like a ghost shroud. She called out, voice shifting between love and madness. "Hellen, my baby, come back please. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to keep you safe." Hellen turned, rain dripping down her face like tears. "Safe? You called me cursed." Anna fell to her knees in the mud, screaming toward the heavens. "I can end it. I can break the curse." She grabbed the kitchen knife she had carried from the house, raising it toward her chest. "Mom, no." Lukas ran forward, slipping on the wet ground, trying to reach her. It was Emil, trembling, soaked, terrified, who reached her first. He threw his arms around her waist, sobbing, "Please don't. She's not a curse, she's my sister." The word sister seemed to pierce through the fog of her madness. Anna froze, her grip on the knife loosening. Her eyes darted between her two sons and the daughter she had imprisoned for most of her life. For a heartbeat, clarity flickered. Her lips quivered. "My children." The knife fell from her hand, sinking into the mud. She collapsed forward, holding Emil, weeping. Lukas reached them, pulling Hellen close, the four of them trembling together beneath the storm. For the first time, Hellen felt something like family. Fragile, wounded, but real. But peace is never permanent in madness. 5 minutes passed. The storm softened. The sound of distant cars echoed from the highway. And then, something shifted in Anna's eyes. The light dimmed again, replaced by terror. "They're coming," she whispered. "The shadows. They'll take her if I don't stop them." "Mom, no." Lukas started, but she had already pulled away. She stumbled toward the road, barefoot, her gown glowing faintly under the headlights approaching through the rain. "Anna!" Viktor's voice bellowed from the doorway, but it was too late. Hellen screamed. Lukas ran. Emil fell to his knees. The screech of brakes tore through the night. A single sharp impact. Then silence, the kind that swallows everything. Rain continued to fall, washing over the broken glass, the mud, the blood. Lukas held Hellen as she trembled, her eyes fixed on the motionless figure on the road. Viktor stood behind them, face pale, his bottle finally falling from his hand. Emil sobbed into his hands, whispering her name. For the first time in 23 years, the curse had been broken, not by light nor by faith but by tragedy. And as dawn crept over the horizon, Hellen looked up through the fading storm and whispered to no one, "The world finally sees me." The morning after was painfully quiet. No voices, no screaming. Only the slow hum of rainwater dripping from the eaves and the faraway wail of a siren. When the sun rose over the rooftops of Prague, the world looked exactly the same. Yet everything inside the house had changed forever. The curse was gone. And in its place was something far more real: grief, shock, and the unbearable weight of truth. Police cars lined the road, their blue lights flickering against the stone walls. Paramedics carried Anna's body away beneath a white sheet, her pale hand slipping out for a moment before disappearing completely. Hellen watched from the porch, wrapped in a blanket that Lukas had thrown over her shoulders. She didn't cry. She couldn't. 23 years in the dark had taught her that silence often said more than tears ever could. When the officers asked questions, Viktor spoke, haltingly, his voice raw. He told them about Anna's illness, her hallucinations, her refusal to take medication. He didn't mention the basement at first, but guilt eventually broke him. When the authorities opened the locked door and saw the small cot, the books, and the claw marks on the walls, their faces froze. One officer quietly turned away. Doctors came. Social workers came. And for the first time, people looked at Hellen not as a secret or a curse, but as a survivor. She was taken to the hospital for a full evaluation. Her bones were fragile, her muscles weak from decades of confinement. Even the sound of footsteps in the corridor made her flinch. Light hurt her eyes, her voice cracked from disuse. When a nurse asked for her name, she hesitated before whispering, "Hellen." It felt strange on her tongue, as if saying it out loud made her finally real. Days turned into weeks. Hellen learned to walk again, one trembling step at a time down sterile white hallways. Therapists guided her through simple things. Brushing her hair, opening curtains, saying good morning without fear. Every new word felt like a rebirth. Viktor visited often, sober now, his hands clean, his eyes clearer. He told her he had joined a recovery group, that he wanted to be a father again if she'd let him. Sometimes he sat by her bed, fixing broken clocks as she rested. "Time," he said once, "owes you everything it took." Lukas, too, visited daily, though guilt haunted him. He confessed that he'd always suspected something. The sounds in the night, the way his mother avoided the basement. "I should have done something," he said, tears in his eyes. Hellen touched his hand gently. "You did," she replied. "You opened the door." Emil was the only one who brought light into her recovery. The boy came with his violin every afternoon, playing softly near her bed. He taught her how to laugh again, how to exist in moments that didn't demand pain. "You have a beautiful name," he told her once. "It sounds like sunlight." After months of therapy, the authorities allowed Hellen to return home, not to the basement but to the world above it. The house was different now. The walls had been repainted. The smell of alcohol and damp was gone. Viktor had turned the old workshop into a bright studio, with flowers on the windowsill. Lukas had rebuilt the broken stair railing. Emil filled the rooms with music. Only the basement remained untouched. Its door was sealed with a new lock, not to imprison but to remember. "We'll never open it again," Viktor said quietly. "Some doors don't lead to anywhere worth going back to." Hellen began to write. Late at night, under the soft glow of a lamp, she filled notebook after notebook with her story. Not for pity but for peace. She wrote about the silence, the walls, the fear, and the strange beauty of finally seeing light. Writing became her way of learning how to live. One morning, as March sunlight spilled through the curtains, she opened the window and let the cold air brush her face. The garden below was full of snowdrops, the first flowers of spring. Lukas and Emil were fixing the fence, their laughter echoing faintly. Viktor was inside, polishing an old clock. The house, once a prison, now felt like something close to home. Hellen stood quietly, her hand resting on the window frame. For the first time, she didn't think about leap years or curses. The world no longer needed to recognize her every 4 years. She existed every day, every moment. Behind her, the sealed door to the basement whispered of the past, but she no longer feared it. It was just a room, a shadow of who she used to be. As the clock downstairs chimed noon, she smiled faintly. Time at last was hers. 1 year later, the house that once echoed with screams and silence became a place of quiet remembrance. They gathered in the small garden behind the house, Lukas, Emil, and Viktor, each carrying a flower for Anna. She had been many things. A painter, a mother, a woman haunted by her own mind. Madness had stolen her, but there had been love buried somewhere beneath the fear. That day, Hellen turned 24. For the first time, her birthday didn't need the world to align with the calendar. She lit her own candles, not waiting for February 29th to arrive. The cake was simple, vanilla with uneven frosting, but it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Lukas laughed when the wind almost blew the candles out. Emil sang shyly at first, and Viktor, with trembling hands, poured juice instead of wine. "I used to think I was born on a cursed day," Hellen said softly, her voice steady but fragile. "Now I know the real curse was not living." She blew out the candles, her eyes glistening as sunlight broke through the morning clouds. The world didn't end. No curse awakened. Only the quiet joy of being alive remained. Later that evening, she stood by the window of her new apartment. Not a basement, but a room filled with air and light. The rising sun painted gold across her face and caught the faint scars on her wrist, once marks of confinement, now symbols of freedom. "I spent 23 years in darkness," she whispered, "just to learn how to love the light." Outside, the dawn kept its promise, silent, tender, and real. Sometimes, when I think about my life, I realize that the hardest part about being born on a leap year isn't waiting 4 years for your birthday. It's waiting a lifetime to be seen, to be recognized as real, to exist beyond the shadows someone else placed you in. Madness doesn't begin with hate. It begins with fear, fear of losing control, fear of love, fear of truth. My mother wasn't a monster. She was a frightened soul who tried to protect me from a world she couldn't understand. Silence, I've learned, can kill more slowly than any wound. It was silence that built my prison, and it was my voice that finally broke the lock. Family can destroy but also redeem. Lukas, Emil, and my father became the bridge that carried me from darkness into daylight. And every light we find after darkness, no matter how faint, no matter how fragile, is a form of rebirth. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but for everyone who had to fight for the right to exist. Thank you for listening.